So tonight we have great pleasure to welcome Philip Carr Gomm, who is a writer, psychologist, but for the purpose of tonight, since 1988, the chief druid and leader of the Order of Bards, Ovets and Druids. So tonight Philip's kindly agreed to talk about the magical and sacred ancient places around Lewis. So it'll be a fantastically personal journey I think we're going to enjoy today, have a look at, to explore. The Druids are basically about nature and bringing the love that we have of nature together with our love of creativity and art. And that's a fantastic combination in this age. I had the pleasure of meeting Philip on, of course, solstice, winter solstice. It was my first experience. And Dirk, who may well be with us later today, played us into this fabulous sunrise, although it was black, completely black. And before Philip had arrived, Dirk had actually said, look, this is the rising of the sun and it's going to rise over there above Firle. But it's not actually, or we're not going to see it anyway because it's so black. But we'll play the music and then we turned to the four corners of the compass and we gave our energy to them. And within seconds, a space appeared above Firle and the sunlight came through. And I thought, so, the floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you. Well, your story of the weather changing, I remember being at Stonehenge, 33 of us, and there was the thickest fog that I'd seen for years, and we gathered around amongst the big old stones of the circle in the middle of the night, and we started to chant. And one of the great tools of magic is sound, the power of sound. And you find it in every magical tradition all over the world, from Africa through to India, right the way across to the west. It's understanding that sound is vibration and it can affect change. And we started to chant. And you could almost hear the wheels turning as the fog just cleared like that, just over Stonehenge. And there was a moon and thousands of stars, it seemed. And we did our ceremony, it lasted about an hour. And when we declared the ending of the ceremony, it just went and closed again, to dry back and forth. So there are mysterious powers of truth.
We hope it doesn't close too quickly.
And so that's really what I wanted to talk to you about this evening, about these mysterious powers and their relationship to the land and to our lives. It's so easy for us to fall into the grip of the everyday mind, the ordinary reductionist mind that is limiting and small and narrow. And if you ever find yourself in the grip of that mind, try, since we're lucky enough to live in this wonderful part of the world, try hopping over to Ashdown Forest at night, up to the Friends Clomp. I don't know if you know it. Does anybody know Friends Clomp in Ashdown Forest? Yes, just a few people. Yes, absolutely wonderful. If you find it on it, just good. If you're lucky, the moon will be out, the stars will be out. And then just walk down, head down through the bracken, down into the valley, and into the forest beside the stream there. And if the grip hasn't been too strong, you'll start to feel this magical sense that the world is far more mysterious and wonderful and unfathomable than you had perhaps been led to believe. And so there's this vision, this is the vision in a way, of the fact that we live in a magical landscape. This, all over the world we find sacred sites and special spots, magical spots. But there's something about England through the chance of history, through other forces perhaps. England particularly has a very high concentration of magical and sacred sites. And over the last few years I've been working on a book with a colleague which came out last year called The Book of English Magic, that talks about this in some detail. And this isn't a chauvinistic idea that somehow England is better than anywhere else. It just happens to be so. And for those who don't believe it, by all means take on the challenge and have a look at the book and see if you can find another country. But what we discovered was that if you said that you wanted to study magic, and you had as much money and time at your disposal as you needed, where should you go and what should you? The answer would be not to Egypt or Paris or to India, but actually to England, because there's so much of it here. And in Sussex in particular, we have an incredible concentration. We live in a landscape of standing stones and stone circles, tumuli and barrows, mounds, tumps or toots as they're called, holy wells, chalk hill figures, old pilgrimage routes, ley lines, old tracks, all around us. And somehow, when we open to that, somehow, I believe, we're able to live deeper and fuller lives. But of course, immediately there comes the challenge. It's like, well, how do you maintain this vision? How does it stay with you? How do you resist that sneaking thought that this is all hogwash or romanticism? And actually, you know, as you sit and watch the news at 10 and you look gloomily at your bank statements and your email inbox that's overflowing, that somehow, how do you say, no, this reality isn't the one I want to live in. I want to live in this other, more mysterious, magical reality. So here's a way that I'd like to suggest for you. I've just got some suggestions for how to do this that are based on an understanding of the Bardic and Druid tradition, although these ideas can be found elsewhere as well. And these ways, there are basically three things, I think, in particular, that can really help to open to this magical landscape. First way is walking out in the land. The second way is uncovering the old stories, the stories that are locked in the land. And the third way is observing the old seasonal festivals. And now, if you combine these three ways, you have a very, very powerful tool to work with into these bodies. And by walking in the landscape, not cycling or driving, but actually walking, we somehow come into relationship with the world in a different way. And I'm sure you all know this, but it's sort of worth saying perhaps that it's so. I remember the first few years that I was living in Lewes, I used to sort of train in from London, because I used to live in London and I'd come in, I was working in London, so I'd come into this town by train. And then I had a strange experience after a friend died, and I went up onto the mount in Lewes and said a prayer for him. And I got this message to go out and to go and walk in the land and to walk to the Long Man at Wilmington. And I did this, and I discovered that my relationship to where I lived changed. Suddenly, by going away from my home, Lansdowne Place, and walking away from it and around on the hilltops, and around and around and around, and coming back, I felt more at home. And I somehow understood the landscape and understood my home in a new way. And of course, pilgrimage has been an activity, a sacred activity that has been undergone by cultures all over the world and spiritual traditions all over the world. Uncovering the old stories, by that I mean looking at the folklore and the legends and the history of the place. Because there's a way in which I could take a particular object, such as this, and actually this isn't going to illustrate my point at all well. I could take an object like this, a glass case, and said it's not particularly interesting. Now, did you know that this was Einstein's? I bought it at Christie's. It cost me £500,000, and immediately it would have a kind of aura, and there would be a whole story connected with it. And you heard about the time when he threw it in the river and his wife caught it and so on. So the whole story attached to it had meaning and purpose. The reason why this object is not a good one is because straight away it seems to be significant and interesting. This is adored. This is a sacred horn, a trumpet that I was hoping... has Dirk arrived?
Yeah, it hasn't arrived, has it?
It would be in your interest, if you are a wind instrument player, it would be in your interest to declare that now. Are you? Is anybody? There's one, over there. Is it because otherwise I'll play it, then you'll regret it. Would you like to play this?
Ex-wind player.
Ex-wind player. Oh, well maybe I won't, okay, shall I? This was found, this is a replica of an instrument found near Battle. It was found in 1952 and then lost. But we use this to start many of our ceremonies. And it's hard to play. It can sound very uncomfortable, but I'll try. can imagine this echoing across the hillsides. And again, the magic of sound that I was talking about. But so stories to do with places, with objects, with the landscape. They start to unlock meaning and to colour our experience of life in a way that can be deeply fulfilling. And then the third technique, observing the old festivals, the 8 festivals of the year, the solstices and the equinoxes, and the Celtic fire festivals, about every 6 weeks or so. This is a practice that some of you may do, some of you may know a lot about, others may know very little. There's a lot in the books here about them, and it's the basis of spiritual practice and Druidry. But let me give an example of how you can fit these 3 elements together to create a way of working. Imagine it's the winter solstice, and you go out to Firle village, before dawn, so it's dark, and you gather in Firle village with a group of people. You see people arriving, 20, 30 people who arrive. And then you make the journey up through the frosty hillside, up 540 feet, up onto Firle Beacon. Frost crunching underfoot, gradually the light changing. And as you're walking up Firle Beacon, it's almost as if you can sense all the people who have walked this way, because you're coming up onto the South Downs Way. And the South Downs Way is an ancient track that runs from Holywell in Eastbourne right the way across to Stonehenge and to Salisbury Plain in the west. And for thousands of years people have walked that way, and it's as if you can sense them. And perhaps you can sense as well the giant who used to live on top of Firle Beacon. His ghost still haunts the place. And it was he who killed the Long Man of Wilmington, who is over on Windover Hill, the great figure in the landscape like that. They once had a stone throwing contest, because life as a giant is very lonely, because there aren't many of you around, and people sort of kind of get frightened of you, so it's hard to have conversations with people and so on. So it's a lonely life. And so what you do is you sort of play, hurling stones with fellow giants on other hillsides. But something went wrong, and a giant hit the Long Man of Wilmington and crashed against the ground, which is why you see him on the side of the hill. But the big barrow that's up at Firle Beacon, just beside that concrete triangulation point up on Firle Beacon, that's actually where the giant is buried. So you're remembering these stories in this landscape. You get up there, and when you arrive up there, you would find 30 or 40 people, together with the people who come up with you. And just as the sun started to rise, you would find yourself participating in a ceremony that I think, in a way, for me, when I experience these, it feels like this is an experience at the sort of leading edge of a new kind of spirituality. One that is particular to the landscape and to the time and to the traditions of these islands and this place. So informed by paganism, by Druidry, by pre-Christian tradition, and by Christianity too. Peter Owen Jones, who I think has talked here as well, comes up onto Firle Beacon and joins in with these ceremonies. So Christianity too. And yet is also universal and global, because it's essentially a group of human beings at the beginning of the 21st century honouring the rising of the sun on this special day and opening to their love of the land and the landscape around them.